Greetings and salutations, people of the internet. Austin here. Welcome to 2026. Hopefully a less insane year for all of us on this ball of dirt. Last time, we ended off the year with the DLC expansion to the Convergents region with the Frigid Territories, which was a complete failure, view-wise. That was a kick to the teeth. Anyway, today is the long-awaited debut of my 11th fakemon region, the Nasik Region. Y'all have been asking about this one for a long time. This is the sister and neighboring region to the Xenia region. This one being based on southern Africa with some Madagascar thrown in. I had a lot of fun with this region, easily being in the top 3 so far. Without further ado, let's begin. Aspear, the fruit bat Pokemon. First up, we have our grass starter based on fruit bats and Pokemon berries. This one being based off of Aspear berries. Cliché? Yes. Adorable? Even more so. The first few passes sucked. I tried making the Pokemon a lot rounder and to look more like the berries I based them on, with the ears being the stem. But they did not look good in the slightest, so I went with the whole body plan you see here currently. In that pass, this had eyebrows and the ears were a slightly different color from the rest of the head, but once I flipped the canvas and fixed the few issues that remained, this was a done deal. My favorite design detail are the freckles. I just think they're cute. I love the shinies for this entire line. Even if this one is an outlier for just one color compared to the other ones. Citrosaur, the fruit glutton Pokemon. Now based on a citrus berry, the first pass of this Pokemon wasn't too bad outside of the feet just looking awful. The general pose, perspective, and design were nailed down fairly quickly. It didn't change enough from Aspear in the first pass, so I gave it the little claws on the wings, changed the shape of the tail, and made the feet a lot smaller. I also made the tongue a lot bigger here alongside with the cheeks. It just made it feel a little bit more adorable. This has my favorite render of the line since I don't get to use underlighting very often in my designs. I love the blue and pink for the shiny. So much so I wish I had gone back and added that for Aspear as well. Oh well. Flapinap, the fruit bat Pokemon. The final evolution of our grass starter, this is now based on a pineapple berry. This is my personal favorite of the final starters, even if I didn't use it on my team. This didn't change a whole lot from the initial sketch, mainly just fixing some anatomy and perspective issues on the wings and legs. I did add the tongue onto the design to make it feel more visually interesting, and give the Pokemon a splash of personality. Color-wise, the only thing I really had to play around with was the shade of orange for the accents across the body. I really do love this line a lot. If I didn't have such a good type balance on my current team, I would have added this in a heartbeat. Sparklemur, the fire troop Pokemon. The fire starter of the region, this line is based on ring-tailed lemurs. The first pass was mostly good, except for the head, which was kind of ass in retrospect. I had some help nailing down the current head shape. Once I had rounded off the head, the design was pretty good to go, all things considered. Definitely the easiest of the base starters. The colors didn't give me any major issues. I really love the green eyes across the board with this entire line. I think it pops super well. The shinies for this line are just solid. Trupyro, the ring-tailed Pokemon. Easily the least good of the middle stage evolutions of the starters. No contest. The first pass was even worse, looking like Sparklemur had just stood up, more or less. Naturally, I had to fix that. But not before doing the final Evo ahead of time, since I had more of an idea behind that. After finishing the final evolution of the line, since ADHD's a bitch, I went back to this one. I made it balanced on its tail for a stronger silhouette and to make it feel a tad bigger than it actually is. I had to move the legs further apart and refine the shapes around the head and neck to really make this Pokemon silhouette pop. I also had to curl the tail more to make it feel more balanced overall. This gave me the most trouble out of the middle stages, only followed by the water starters, but we'll get to that soon enough. Hollerupt, the Horntail Pokemon. Now we fully leaned into the sound element of the design with the final evolution here. I made this design after a suggestion was sent my way with the Horntail idea. The first pass wasn't bad, but I needed to push the pose further into something that was actually interesting to look at. So I spread the legs out further and I bent the arm in front more. Other than that, this didn't change much further. I had a lot of fun rendering these superheated sections of the tail. I made this Pokemon a lot more feminine since lemur troops are typically led by an alpha female, and to just set these apart from the other fire starters in my catalog, which are traditionally a lot more masculine looking. Once I had the colors locked down, the rest was fairly easy. I do love the final starters of this region. I would have taken each one of them if I could. Sampond, the catfish Pokemon. Our water starter of the region, this is based on the Vundu catfish. I had some issues with the design, mainly in terms of the proportions. I had to give it a lot more of a smaller, more ovalish body to feel more like a starter. I then had to make the front fins a lot bigger to hold this Pokemon up better and just have a little bit more variation in the proportions after some feedback. The colors took a little bit of time to nail down. I initially had orange accents across the board, but that bit off Mudkip too much, so I had to go back to the drawing board until we arrived on the current design. This is a nice change of pace after looking at my other water starters. Unfortunately, this line has the weakest shinies of the starter trios. Lind Aqua, the murky water Pokemon. This one gave me the most issues, only because I didn't push the design far enough multiple times. The first and second passes were overall fine, but they lacked a lot of defining details and the silhouette was just balls. I added the horns on the head to better lead into the final evolution, which I once again finished before working on this design, and I opened up the mouth to make it a touch more interesting. The colors weren't too difficult since I had the final evolution to work off of. This is probably the best middle stage of the trio, only rivaled by our grass starter. Vundeep, the voracious fish Pokemon. Now we bring in the dragon type for this line, which is mainly just for vibes, and I just wanted to play with that type combo for a starter, for a change. The first pass wasn't too bad. I locked a lot of the design down there. I did have to add the color tips to the end of the whiskers to help balance out the colors and the design overall. I originally only did that for the bottom pair, but had to add the top ones a bit after some work. I'm glad I brought in the purple for the fins for the final evolution. I didn't think it would read that well as a dragon type without that, since a lot of them are purple and or green. This was definitely the simplest of the final evolutions, but sometimes that's for the best. I was more than happy to make this the first member of my in-game team. Civicate, the Coffee Thrall Pokemon. Our Route 1 normal type, this is based on civets and coffee beans, more specifically Kobe Luwak. If you know, you know. This design barely changed during development. I only needed to make the coffee bean pattern more obvious and give this Pokemon any sense of actual motion or personality. For a long time, this thing was just staring into the void. Not much to say with this design. At least the shiny's pretty damn good. The name was a lot darker for a hot minute there. My first pitch was Civictum. Yeah, not great. Someone helped me with the name, and the rest was history. Cafivet, the Coffee Rush Pokemon. Again, this barely changed during development. The biggest issues were the legs and feet. The proportion and perspective were seriously off, and once I flipped the design, I fixed them easily. Not much more there. I really love the addition of the orange to the color scheme, even if it's more of an accent than anything else really. This thing is hyper as hell, so I wanted it to feel more wild and crazy since it's hopped up on a shit ton of caffeine. Hellier, the Rascal Pokemon. Our Route 1 bird, this is based on the go-away bird, aka the co-away bird, with this stage also being based on mischievous kids. The first pass was just way too nice looking for this line, since the evolution is a gigantic asshole. The Dennis the Menace ass personality was a suggestion, and it was too perfect not to use. Once I got that down, the rest was history. I love the little baseball cap this thing has on. I just think it instantly makes it look like a rambunctious tyke. The colors were pretty easy since I did the evolution first. Again. This is a fun regional bird. Not my best, but it's one of the most entertaining. Gizzard, the grouchy bird Pokemon. Like many of the early mons in this region, I did this stage first like I had said previously. The first pass was terrible. The crotchety old man vibe was there from jump, but the pose and proportions were weak. It was more of a hunchback than an actual old fossil. The next pass added the cane and the beard. I was getting closer. The next pass was the final product, more or less, with a few changed shapes here and there. I really do love this stage. I made it a sound type since the go-away bird is very loud with its distinctive cry, and playing into old-timers yelling, "Get off my lawn!" The OG name was Cantankerous, but it was a touch too wordy. Thankfully, Gizzard was sent my way during brainstorming. Conswarm, the Ravenous Ant Pokemon. Our Route 1 bug, I actually went back and added this Pokemon to the line since originally its evolution was going to be a single stage Pokemon. The first pass was rough, but it was a solid enough foundation to work from. I really just had to fix the proportions and smooth out the lines for a better silhouette. I had to make the head and thorax a touch bigger, adjust the legs, and give it more of a neck. Other than that, this was an easy Pokemon to work on. It was fun, but the evolution is where the real magic happens. Cadavasect, the Bone Swarm Pokemon. This evolves from Conswarm once exposed to an Ectostone. Fun fact, this was the first Pokemon I designed for this region. This is based on the ants from the movie The Bone Snatcher, and I had an idea what I wanted to do for the design, so I went ahead and drew this months in advance. I did have to go back and redraw this Pokemon with the tricks I had learned since then to be more in line with the rest of my current rendering style. I love this Pokemon. Easily one of my favorite bug types in my catalog. I didn't have to change a whole lot with the OG design, mainly just touching up a few things here and there. I wanted to put this on my team, but I couldn't make it fit. I created Insect Surge as a new train option and as a means to give bug types a bit more longevity in battle. Meow, the False Darling Pokemon. This little cutie is based on the black-footed cat and is the early game dark type that I like to do with my regions. Fun fact, these kitties IRL are complete killing machines. The first pass got the colors and the tally mark pattern down, but it was way too close to Litten in every other regard. The next pass is basically the final product, making this thing adorable in order to fool its prey into getting close. I almost gave it Whittle Fangs to allude to its true nature, but I didn't, just to help keep up the ruse. I brought back Unassuming from my Onkuvian Delcatty since it was just too perfect not to use for this thing. Oh my god, I love the shinies for this line. They are so good. Catvinoth, the Great Hunter Pokemon. On the subject of the black-footed cat, this now brings in Craven the Hunter as one of its inspirations. You might be asking, why? Simple. The black-footed cat is the most successful cat in terms of hunting success, so that made me think of Craven. The first pass was more or less there, but I had to simplify some of the patterns on the lower body. I did try to give it Craven's leopard print pants, but that got busy way too quickly, so I just added the tally mark pattern on the thighs. Making the vest look natural was the hardest part of the design, but I eventually got there. This isn't only the Marvel character turned fakemon in this region. Stay tuned. Nagirok, the Clubtail Pokemon. Our Pika clone, this is based on Red Rock Rats. Yes, that's why this isn't an electric rock type. I am a basic bitch at times. The first pass was trash. No understating that. The body sucked, and the tail was way too small for what I had in mind. In the next pass, I gave it the bowling pin body plan it has here, with the much longer tail. I changed the angle of the rock at the end so we could have some more visual flair with where the tail meets the rock itself. I just thought that'd be more interesting. I did the whiskers to make the silhouette a touch more interesting, and boom! We had a winner! I gave it huge power as the hidden ability since I thought that'd be hilarious and fitting with the big-ass rock tail. I gave it vegetarian since triple R in nature are vegetarians themselves, and just to help eliminate one type weakness they had. Alowana, the tiny bulb Pokemon. Our early game grass type, this line is based off of African aloe vera. The shape of the body in the first pass was mid, so I had to really simplify it to help it read easier at a glance. I did have to redraw the top of the body since I made them too thick as they went up, when I really should have made them skinnier. It read more as an onion than anything else. This isn't a terribly complex design, so apologies if this entry is on the shorter side. The abilities feel pretty self-explanatory. This entire line is a spiky medicinal plant. Huge Aloe, the spike leaf Pokemon. I did this stage last after taking care of the first and third stages, and this was super easy compared to the others. I didn't have to change a damn thing from the base sketch. The colors were easy since this is basically a scaled down version of the final evolution. I made this a grass ground type since I thought that would be the most interesting type combo as opposed to just doing grass fairy again. Plus type balancing across the board. Varaganga, the Healing South Pokemon. To the surprise of no one, I started with the stage first when developing the line. The first sketch and the cleanup pass were pretty good, only needing to add the spikes on the leaves across the body during the coloring stage. The colors didn't give me any trouble since I had the basis with such a strong natural color scheme that the plants have in nature. No issues came with the render. The way I did the colors for the flowers made it difficult to shade/highlight after the fact with the shiny. It took more effort than usual, but I eventually got it. Nasekian Trimworm, the Sandworm Pokemon. Our first regional variant. This is a fun one. This is based on the African Graboids from Tremors 5. Well, with one exception, but we'll get there. I'll admit, this stage was an undertaking since the OG Trimworm was pretty damn hard to follow up on with how close it is to normal Graboids. I made this Pokemon a lot spikier to resemble the African subspecies, and used the fact their tongues can detach in the movies from the main body for this design. I made said body longer, darkened the color palette, and made red more prevalent across the board. I really do love this regional line so much. Nasekian Shriekcoon, the Walking Husk Pokemon. This is the exception I was talking about. Since the African Graboid skipped the Shrieker stage, this is based on the mutant Shriekers from Tremors 7. This design was a lot easier to translate than the African Graboids, finding a good picture of the African Graboid being the hardest part, sometimes. Added the armor section on the back, the X shape across the bridge of the beak, made the claws a lot bigger, and lastly I changed the patterns on the legs. Not to mention making the face a lot more defined than their Vanikian cousins. If a few of you are annoyed this line didn't change enough, hold on to your butts. Terra Rocket, the Propulsion Tail Pokemon. Since the African Ass Blasters are so different than their North American versions, I decided to go ahead and make this a regional evolution for the line. This one was tricky, but thankfully I found some really good reference photos to work from. I streamlined the body to play into the aerodynamic nature of its body, and to make it more distinct to the comparatively squashed American Ass Blaster. I simplified the wings here to make my life just a hell of a lot easier. I did have to slightly tweak the tail to make it look like fire coming out of a rocket. I did have some help with the name, since originally I wanted to go with Horror Rocket, but that was a tad wordy. Eventually we settled on the current name. This line was a lot of fun to work on. Thergometer, the cold-blooded Pokemon. Based on thermometers and Agama lizards, this little guy actually loves the heat. The first pass got the broad strokes down, but it was rough. The face in particular. Woof. The feet were also wrong. Way too big, and they just didn't feel right for this particular Pokemon. The next pass, I changed the shape of the feet, I added the eyebrows, shrank the mouth, and added the purple in the middle when I was doing the colors. All in all, this is a very simple design, but I also designed this Pokemon around its new ability, so I think it works out. I hope y'all like this new ability, because you'll be seeing a lot of it in the future. Boulder Sling, the Reckless Bite Pokemon. Our 3-stage rock type of the region, this line is based on the Boom Sling and the mythical Root Sling. The first pass wasn't bad, but it was just so damn generic that I had to redesign it completely. I did take a break and work on the final evolution to establish a baseline for the rest of this evolutionary line first. So I actually ended up doing this stage last. Once the other 2 stages were done, redesigning this Pokemon was a breeze. Looking at this line as a whole, I'm very proud of how they all came out. Grootfang, the Rock Leg Pokemon. This Pokemon isn't too complex, all things considered. I mainly just scaled down the final evolution by a lot to make this design. This didn't change at all from the base sketch to the final design in any way that really warrants any discussion. I made the rocky legs to help this thing move around in the caves they call home, and to make this evolution feel more natural going into the final stage of the line. I did briefly try to give it rocky ears to play into the Groot Sling inspiration, but it looked just way too much like the final evolution, so I had to scrap that. Elefake, the Rock Disguised Pokemon. This unit evolves from Grootfang when it levels up holding a King's Rock, and this thing goes full on Groot Sling. Take a shot every time I start with the final evolution of the line in this region, and I guarantee you'll die. The first pass was crowded, and a tad undercooked. I needed to rework the pose, mainly adding the back legs to the design to avoid accidentally ripping off Ruby Art's own Groot Sling Pokemon. It's really good, go check it out. Always gotta promote others in the community. It worked out in the end, so I can't be too salty. I did have to play with the colors a lot with this stage in particular to keep things readable. To clarify, the snake is the actual body and the elephant is a rock this thing is controlling to move around. This is definitely one of the most complex rock-type lines I've ever done. Cauldrode, the Boiling Frog Pokemon. This Pokemon is something I've had on the books for a long time, being based on the Boiling Frog metaphor and cauldrons. This was super easy to design. I only needed to make it a 3/4 view since the first pass was just a full-on front view, and just to add some steam coming off the top of the body. The colors and design were simple, the rendering not so much. Once again, the gradient ended up making the shading of this Pokemon a lot more of a pain in the ass than I would have liked. Yes, I made the shiny very witch-coded to play into the cauldron. Yeah, that's totally the reason. Paleopup, the Bone Digger Pokemon. These goodish puppers are based on Africanus and paleontologists. This was perfect from the jump. I have no notes whatsoever with this design. The giant bone was so much fun to design, easily the highlight. I just needed to clean up the design to make it really perfect. I love the idea of a dog digging up ancient dinosaur bones just to gnaw on them, even when they're not supposed to. He's such a good boy. Barcheologist, the Relic Finder Pokemon. This pupper barely changed from the first sketch. I know I keep saying that, so you're just gonna have to get used to it. The only major change from the base sketch is the tail, which was originally more overtly brush-like. After some feedback, I changed it to be more subtle while still keeping the same overall theme going with it. I tried to make the fur pattern not be too much like actual clothes, despite that being the general idea. The giant bone was also a lot of fun to play with again, almost as much as with the first stage. If the name wasn't obvious enough, this stage is more of an archaeologist. Shervil, the Tall Ears Pokemon, the rivals to our goyish boys. This line is based on Servals and Grave Robbers and is a version exclusive. For a long time, this line was going to be an Ice type before a suggestion to turn them into a Steel type came into play. I made the ears look like spades for reasons I'll explain more in the evolutions breakdown. This design, much like its counterpart and rival, was basically done in the first pass, only needing to iron out the rough spots, pun intended. I love the blue for the shinies of this line. So clean. Servalor, the Night Thief Pokemon. This Pokemon evolves from Shervil once exposed to a combat stone. The first pass of this design was a fair bit different when it was still being designed as an Ice type. The Steel suggestion came with the idea to turn the ears into shovels so they can dig up their loot. I love the idea so much I changed the design to better reflect that and the new typing. From there, the rest was easy. Colors were a breeze. I really love the light blue accents on there. I only needed to adjust the main shade of gray for the body. All in all, these are all pretty good version counterparts, which I have a good amount of in this game. Cathfant, the Tiny Cow Pokemon. Our first baby Pokemon introduced in the region, this is the pre-evolved form of both Miltank and Tauros. The suggestion for more neck for the gender differences came early on during discussions, but I also added the shorter horns on the female version of this Pokemon. Other than that, there's not much more to say. I just tried to find a good middle ground for both Pokemon. This is mainly the case with the color scheme, which is more apparent with the shiny, if I'm being honest. But we're not done with Miltank just yet. It doesn't feel right to only give Tauros an evolution, now does it? Mazebu, the Milk Cow Pokemon. The evolved form of Miltank once exposed to a shiny stone, this is based off of Zebu cattle. I modeled the back and tail to look like a giant jug to help carry water, or in this case, milk, to give this Pokemon some visual bulk and to play into the lore. The overall design is more or less the same from the first pass, just expanding the existing elements. These straps going under the arms were a suggestion that was sent to me that just worked out way too well to ignore. I played with the colors for a bit, but there's nothing too drastic. I really like the contrast between this and Minotauros as evolutions, which is, I think, a good sign of a split evolution. This heifer is the second member of my in-game team. Just don't tell M&J TV. Nasekian Rufflet, the Eaglet Pokemon. The next regional variant up to bat is based on the African fish eagle. The first few passes didn't change enough from normal Rufflet, so I had to go back and change a few things. The droopy/wet feathers were a suggestion sent my way, and oh my god, did it save this design so much. I had to do a few takes to get it to where it is now, but damn am I glad I did so. This looks way better. From there, the rest was easy. I will say, looking back on this now, the highlights on the dark blue feathers are a touch too bright. I should have adjusted the saturation to make them feel a touch more natural. Nasekian Braviary, the Hook Talon Pokemon. The first pass for this Pokemon wasn't too bad, but I didn't push it far enough. The head was in the wrong position, the tail feathers were too short, and boy did the feet look wrong. The next pass fixed a lot of the issues from the initial sketch that I had. I made the main talon on each foot into a fishing hook if it wasn't obvious enough, and I figured that was the easiest way to bring in the fishing part of the fish eagle. I really love the orangest part of the color scheme. It stood out nicely. The shinies for this line are just okay. Gourdvour, the Haunted Gourd Pokemon. This nightmare is based on the Devouring Gourd myth, and oh god did this give me trouble. I went through so many passes with this Pokemon. At one point, this was a snail wearing a gourd for a shell. Eventually, I settled on this Pokemon disguising itself as a calabash gourd in order to lure in humans. This form really came together after that, being a piece of cake once I had the foundation set. But it's the form change where a lot of my headaches started. The Man of Feasting form went through a crap ton of passes. For the longest time, the gourd itself was at the end of the body like a tail. The Pokemon was moving around on giant vines. After a lot of thumbnail sketches, I settled on the current design you see here. This is definitely the most challenging form change thus far in my catalog, but I have to admit, this thing is cool. Mind Drill, the Hypno Cheek Pokemon. Before anyone asks, yes, I did use Chimchar for the pose and perspective for this Pokemon. No, I don't regret it. Anywho, this Pokemon is based off of a Mandrill. The first attempt was pretty damn good from jump, only needing a few tweaks here and there. I made the mohawk a lot taller for a better silhouette, and I added the band on the nose to make it feel more like a Mandrill. This is a very simple Pokemon, but the hypnotic butt pattern made me laugh, so I had to use it. The colors did take a bit of tweaking, mainly just to not overcomplicate the design. Mandrosis, the Flashbang Pokemon. This mental mammal evolves from Mind Drill once it learns its signature move, Psychic Flare. The first pass of this Pokemon got the overall pose and vibe down, but it was severely undercooked, needing a lot more details to make it interesting. I gave it more of a head of hair, the bands are around the ankles, and made the purple chest hair take up more of the surface area just for starters. The next major change came with the eye shape. I narrowed the eyes into the slits you see here just for something more interesting than the eyes open, nobody's home look of the first pass. I then changed the brow shape and the rest fell into place. Keep this Pokemon in mind. We might be bringing it back in a certain way later on in the region. Stay tuned. Current, the Leaping Volt Pokemon. This mad lad with mad hops is based on a caracal. Full transparency. I added the sound type for this Pokemon after the fact since I was lacking in them at the time. In terms of the design, I did have to add the sound wave pattern on the legs to help sell the updated typing. I wanted a more dynamic pose with this Pokemon, so I searched until I found the best photo of a caracal mid-air. The colors also took a fair minute to iron out, mainly the shade of orange used for the main body. The first crack was too bright, and the shade of purple needed a slight touch-up. From there, this is pretty good. It's not a bad Pokemon, but I think I could have done more with it. Hindsight. Kudushay, the Slingshot Pokemon. Based on Kudus, Slingshots, and Trebuchets, the first pass of this Pokemon was rough. It lacked a lot of details and some much-needed bulk. Originally, the horns were more overtly Slingshot-like with a band connecting them with the plate in between. The name suggestion came while I was working on this Pokemon. It was a really good one. Major props to them for the idea. The second pass of the design was more or less the current one, only missing the plus sign on the plate. This is a fun single-stage Pokemon, all things considered. Keyleevil, the Towering Bug Pokemon. Our first Convergent Pokemon of the region. This is based on Giraffe Weevils and Keyleaf from the neighboring Xenia region. I love this Pokemon so much. I got pretty close with the first pass to being perfect, but a few things needed to be changed. Chief among them was adjusting the position of the front leg closest to the camera. I had to move that forward to give this Pokemon more of a real sense of balance. I removed the pattern I had on top of the legs and kept it to just the neck. It was getting too busy otherwise. The colors were pretty easy, all things considered. I especially loved the shiny ones. Oh my god, that palette. This is one of my favorite Convergent Pokemon that I've ever done. Nasikian Konokaf, the Snowback Pokemon, another regional form of one of my own fakemon. Been doing that a lot more recently. This is naturally based on a wildebeest. Giving some love to the Nasik region, this was a simple but fun regional variant. This Pokemon is a lot happier than their Italian cousins. I made the back more of an overt mountain shape. I added a lot of ice across the body to help draw in the eye. I changed the nose here, making it a separate color from the rest of the head. Lastly, I made the white of the eye into purple to help make it stand out from the rest of the white on the color scheme. The shiny is a bit lackluster in hindsight, but not all of them can be winners. Thankfully, it's not as bad as a Gengar or a Garchomp. Wildeblizzard, the Frozen Herd Pokemon. This evolves from Nasikian Konakaf when exposed to a combat stone. I went with the regional evolution here since the inspiration for the normal evolution of Konakaf felt tied to Italian/Greek culture. Plus, regional evolutions are fun and I just wanted some more variety. The first pass got the overall look of the Pokemon down flat, but it was lacking a lot of the more interesting elements, and some of the proportions were just out of whack. Mainly the ice at the end of the tail. I combined the horns and the eyebrows together for a more distinctive look, while I added the ice to the shoulders to help give this some more visual bulk. Lastly, I added the green pupil just to make this design a touch more unique compared to its Prevo, and I didn't want the pupil to blend into the eyebrow if I had kept the normal colors. This is a solid Pokemon all around. Aardvark, the vacuum cleaner Pokemon. One of the few gimmick mons of this region, this is based off of aardvarks and vacuum cleaners. This barely changed from the first draft, only needing to add some minor details on the nose. I added the blue stripe around the middle there just for some color balancing. I know this entry is super short, but this was a super easy design to execute. The ability is super fun, but it is niche as hell. I don't see myself giving it off super often. Imbil, the Firehorn Pokemon. Based off of African Hornbills, this is, again, another super easy design that barely changed from the first draft. Though, I did have to change the shape of the crest on the beak with this Pokemon to better resemble a flame. Other than that, this was pretty good to go from jump. If I had created Ignition prior to the Onkuv DLC, this Pokemon would have had it over Flame Body. Hornburn, the Firehorn Pokemon. Not many changes were needed for this one, but there's at least something to talk about here. The first pass of this Pokemon was too tall, really coming off as stiff, so in the next pass, I made the torso longer and had it resemble its Prevo's body plan just a touch more. I also added the slight curve to the pattern on the tail feather, so it was just a touch more interesting to look at. Still not a super long breakdown, but hey, them's the breaks. Vandalart, the spray paint Pokemon. Our next new evolution, this is the evolved form of Grafaiai once exposed to a sludge stone, still keeping the pre-existing inspirations. This was a lot of fun and a gigantic pain in the ass. The first pass really felt more like a Mega Evolution more than anything. Granted, the line between that is very thin depending on the design. Though, I did establish a few things with that pass: the hair, the hood, and the striped legs. I went through so many passes that really didn't go anywhere outside of one or two visual elements that made the final cut. It didn't change enough, and I was really getting irritated, but then it finally happened. I tried something different, and I got this current design. I love the gas clouds coming out of the mouth. It's a small touch, but I think it goes a long way. This Pokemon and the next one are another pair of version exclusives. Dynastina, the Bite Pokemon. Our next version exclusive counterpart here is the evolved form of Mightyena once it defeats 3 Alpha Mightyena in battle. Before anyone asks, yes, the shiny is Zingor from Monster Hunter. It was a suggestion and the color scheme was just too damn good to pass up on. Still never played Monster Hunter before anyone asks that question as well. The first pass felt more like a mega than anything else. Granted, that line is super blurry at times, like I just said, but I digress. There were parts I liked, mainly the ears and the idea of a tall mane of hair along the back. The second pass was a lot better. Almost perfect, but it was still just a touch off in some areas. I needed to shrink the tail by a large margin to get it to the current position, and the feet needed some adjusting to feel more balanced. Lastly, the head was a touch too small, so I had to expand that cranium. Color-wise, I knew I didn't want to do red accents since a large percentage of Mighty Inna Evos or Megas do that for the accent color, and I wanted to do something different. I went with gold since I thought that would look best on a dark steel type, and it would help blend into the savannas of the region better as well. The rest was super easy. I wanted to put you on my team, but I couldn't. Marabou, the Undertaker Pokemon. This atrocious avian is based on Marabou storks. This wasn't too hard to iron out the broad strokes for. The first pass was solid, but a few of the shapes in the back needed some work. Mainly the tail feathers. They needed a bit more definition and energy specs leaking off the body. The mark near the eye was too large by just a hair, so I had to shrink that down so it didn't take up too much space. Lastly, I added the 2 circles on the chest to look like clamps holding up a coat or cape. Just thought I'd add that little visual flair for this nightmare bird. The colors were easy. This is not a very complicated design. I did briefly consider giving it a pupil, but the all-white eyes were just too much fun to ruin by adding on to them. Camesper, the lure lizard Pokemon. So if you've been living under a rock for a while, Game Freak was hit by a large terror leak, which showed off a lot of things behind closed doors, a good number of which happened to be cut designs and Pokemon. One of which happened to be a trippy-looking, seemingly poison-type chameleon that you will see on screen here. I wanted to take my own crack at the design and change it into a psychic dragon type just for some type balancing. I made the arms a lot longer and I brought the Pokemon down on all fours. I used some of the pre-existing color scheme for this line, but I added some of my own tweaks so I didn't feel like a complete fraud, mainly the pink jaw, stomach, and tail. I did keep part of the poison typing for this Pokemon with the ability as a nod, and just having more unique abilities despite the typing is interesting to play around with. Mesmelian, the hidden psychic Pokemon. Like with its pre-evolution, I kept the base of the original design for this Pokemon and added my own little tweaks. I massively shrank these horns and these spiral elbows, I guess is the right term. I made the chin a lot longer and added the spiral a bit at the end there for some consistent shapes. Lastly, I added the pattern to the end of the tail and the feet, though the feet are a lot less of a change in comparison. I like bringing life to some of these cut Pokemon. I do have a plan for another one in my next region in the future. Color-wise, I added the dark blue, green, and the light blue accents to the color scheme from the Prevo. I just love these guys. They're nothing super complicated, but they don't need to be. Catagalago, the elastic tail Pokemon. This little cutie is based on bush babies and is honestly one of the weaker designs in this region. This barely changed from the first draft, only really changing the eye patterns of the goggles and generally just around the mouth. Oh, I also did add the leg patterns to the back legs since they were barren in the first pass. The name was a suggestion that I just liked a lot. The Galago part of the name is just another name for bush babies, FYI. I brought back Rebound from the Onkuv region finally to give this Pokemon something a little bit more interesting ability-wise. I don't hate this Pokemon, but if you wanted to consider this thing filler, I wouldn't argue despite the brutality of it. Nasikian Espathra, the ostrich Pokemon. This regional variant is primarily based off of African fashion. The mud around its body is a fashion statement more than anything, and it gave me an excuse to play around with the shapes more. In the first pass, the hat and the hair were a lot smaller, so they got buffed up in the following passes. I had to simplify the leg patterns a bit, mainly just removing some spots of mud splatter here and there so it read clearer. I had to make the neck fairly longer early on into the redraws to make it feel more natural despite the dirt clod covering up the top of the neck. A few changes here and there, and this absolute diva was good to go. I did debate making it mono ground, but I didn't have a whole lot of psychic types at the line, so I kept it as the dual typed it is now. Squire Sect, the Armor Cricket Pokemon. Our next baby Pokemon introduced, this is the pre-evolved form of Nightydid, and evolves into that once they defeat 3 Nightydids in battle. The first pass got the basic design down, but the pose and personality were boring as hell. It was just standing there, like a goober. After I got the colors nailed down, I went back and gave it the current pose to feel more dynamic, and to give it just a smidge bit of character. The rest was a piece of cake from there. I really feel this is a simple but effective baby Pokemon. Road Diffuse, the Bomb Finder Pokemon. I created this line to be a version-exclusive rival to the next Pokemon I'll be talking about after this. Our little mouse here is based on bomb squads and southern pouched rats, which IRL can be trained to sniff out buried explosives. Hence the custom ability. A little on the nose, I know, but it works. I looked at bomb squad uniforms trying to get as close as possible without making it look like it was just wearing clothes. I made it a sound type for type variety and to play into the predator-prey dynamic of its rival. This is a simplistic design by my standards, but I think anything else would have been too much. I might give this an evolution or a mega one day in the future, so it's only time will tell. Tick Tick, the landmine Pokemon. Fun fact, this is an old design of mine from a cancelled fan game I've brought up once or twice. I've been meaning to give it new life, and this was the perfect opportunity to do so. The first order of business was simplifying the back and fixing the perspective overall for this design. If this wasn't blaringly apparent, this is based off of ticks and landmines. Most of the actual work went into reworking the landmine section of the actual body. Once that was cleared up, the rest was easy. Naturally, I had to give this Pokemon TNT for its ability. I think this and Road Diffuse are a fun pair of version exclusives. Hairpert, the humble farmer Pokemon. This chill little guy is based on Bowerpert horses and farmers. The first pass was hot garbage, completely lacking a secondary theme outside of trying to cram Horsetail Restio as part of the design. It took some research to find out that Bowerperts are hardy workhorses. Literally. So I decided to turn this line into farmers. It took a few sketches to get the overall design down. All I needed to change the basket on the back to look more natural, kind of like a nest. After that, this was pretty easy. I do wish I had changed the shiny up more in hindsight. I'm not sure whether or not the darker green was the right call. Bowerware, the drafted Pokemon. Our favorite pony evolves into this once exposed to a leaf stone and is now based on conscripted soldiers. Bowerperts were used a lot in battle in the past, and I wanted to reference that for this evolution. The name was a fantastic suggestion during development. I cannot take credit for it. The first pass of this design was okay. I knew I didn't want to make it look like a traditional fairy type, but act like it in the dex entries and lore. The pose was more or less there, but the proportions of the design and the legs were very lackluster, so I had to change a lot of the details. Added the hay over the eyes to feel more hardened and stern, lacking the view into its proverbial soul. I changed up the shape of the legs, as I said, added more details to the hay flak jacket, and tied up the end of the tail for a more interesting silhouette. The colors took a fair bit of time, mainly for the central shade of pink for the body. I do really like this shiny a lot more compared to its Prevo. Nixot, the Fang Hood Pokemon. Our next new evolution, this is the evolved form of Arbok once it levels up holding a dragon scale, and is based on the war bats from Godzilla vs. Kong. My kaiju itch had to be scratched. Sue me. The first pass was pretty damn good. I got the pose more or less nailed down, as well as the proportions with the exception of the tail. The fine details as the hood pattern on the other hand, that took a lot longer. Hell, the inside of the hood was easily the hardest thing about this design. The brows needed work on the first pass, and the tail was too busy, as well as just being in a less interesting position. In the next pass, I had to shrink the head so the Pokemon looked a bit bigger. I had to thicken up the body since it was just a touch too skinny, and lose some of the spikiness so it looked less like a Mega Evolution. I did add the spikes on the end of the wings/hood to better reference its source material and make it feel a bit more like a proper evolution. I know that kind of sounds contradictory, and it is. Just roll with it. I love this Pokemon, especially the shiny. Hamperclap, the lightning bird Pokemon. Our tiny bird here is based on the Hammerclap and the Impundulu, a South African thunderbird, more or less. The first pass was boring. The basic design and pose were there, but the execution was so dull. The proportions felt way too much like a middle stage, so I shrank and simplified the design a lot. Body plan did fall a bit too close to Imbil, so I had to make a few more passes to get this design where it needed to be. The head was originally a lot more pronounced, but it didn't look as good in practice. Lastly, I tilted the head upwards just to feel cuter, even if it's in the same damn pose as Imbil in hindsight. Good job, me. I created Rainstorm to give electric type some love ability wise, and because the name was too peak not to use. Ampundulu, the lightning bird Pokemon. This fella here evolves from Hammerclap once it learns Thunderclap. I know, aren't I clever? Unlike its Prevo, this design was pretty damn good from the start. I had a cakewalk with this design compared to the Prevo. Only needed to make the back wing a touch bigger and fix the front-facing foot a bit. Otherwise, no major changes during development. One of the rare, shorter entries from me. Sorry about that. Regardless of that, though, this is the third member of my in-game team. Larva, the big brain Pokemon. Originally, the evolution was going to be a single-stage Pokemon, but the line felt incomplete after some feedback, so I added this guy as a Prevo. The line itself is based on mosquitoes and evil geniuses. In the first pass of the design, the torso was just way too long and it felt cramped as a result. I almost made it mono-psychic, but I decided to make this Pokemon just as much of an asshole as its evolution. Yes, there is a lot of visual overlap with the Blipbug line. Got some flack for that, but I tried my best to make it distinctive. I gave the line Levitate just so this Pokemon could float in midair and Aura Farm while scheming. Prankster was a no-brainer. I'm not sorry. Nosquito, the Brain Drain Pokemon. Fun fact, this is one of my oldest unreleased designs going all the way back to 2021. So naturally, a lot had to change. This sucker was also part of that cancelled fan game I occasionally bring up. Same as Tick Tick. As you can see, the OG design is hot garbage. So I massively buffed up the abdomen and brain in the jar, shrank the legs, added the blue and dark purple accent colors, changed the wing patterns completely, and to top it all off was a minor pose change. This was such a much needed update, and I'm really glad I brought it into the fold officially. Nasikian Impidimp, the wily Pokemon. Our next regional variant, this entire line is based on the Tokowash, an African goblin-like creature that can turn invisible when drinking water in some depictions. Most of the time, they're depicted as assholes, so I flipped it so this line is chaotic good who punish the wicked. The first pass was more or less there, minus the nostril and just generally being rough around the edges. The hand in front needed some work in particular. Once that was fixed, this was cake. I brought back Maelstrom from the Vanek DLC since I didn't want that to be a one-off ability. Nasikian Morgrim, the Water Imp Pokemon. Once again, first pass, pretty much on the money, outside of some proportion and perspective issues. The front-facing foot had to be adjusted, and the fin hair in the back needed to be thickened up by just a touch. I also made the ear in the back a touch bigger, and lastly, I had to tilt the Pokemon a bit more to the right so it felt a touch more balanced. No issues with the colors, only briefly debating the yellow eyes before locking them in. I almost wish I went back and added them to Impidimp, but it does help with the progression of the line visually. Nasikian Grimmsnarl, the Octohair Pokemon. This was easily the hardest of the line to work on. Oh, I went through so many passes. I liked the idea of turning the hair of Grimmsnarl's arms into actual tentacles, with the hands becoming the beak, because was a suggestion sent to me that I just adored. The legs on the first pass were genuinely terrible. They didn't work at all with Grimmsnarl's body, so I had to iron that out pretty quickly. I did the colors early on just to get a feel for the design. Not a whole lot changed after that pass, outside of exposing more of the face and adding the pink eyebrows for some color balancing. From there, I added this down. I adore the shiny for this change. The red does so much of the heavy lifting, but damn it, it works. Another Pokemon I really wish I could have added to the team. Mucusy, the Slimefish Pokemon. The most disgusting Pokemon of the region. This line is based off of the Hagfish. Legit, this was perfect from the beginning. I didn't have to change anything about this design, more or less. At most, all I had to do was clean up the line work and tweak the size of the drool coming out of its maw. The shiny is a bit underwhelming in hindsight. The dark green and blue really don't contrast that much. Thankfully, the evolution shiny is so much better. Hagul, the Slime Spectre Pokemon. This gooey ghoul evolves from Mucusy once exposed to an Ectostone. I did a few passes with this Pokemon since I initially was unsure of the first pass. The antennae were a lot smaller, it lacked the heart in the center, as well as the tiny mustache. Initially, the color scheme was various shades of green, kind of like Goop from Ben 10 Alien Force, but it didn't work well for the design. The second pass was way too small, but the antennae, mouth, and pattern were solidified with this design in that pass. This is also where the Mucusy heart came into play. Eventually, I went back to the first pass's pose and just updated it with the additions I had made with the second pass of the design. The tail did have a brief skull and crossbones pattern, but it got scrapped since it cluttered the design way too much. The updated color scheme was a suggestion that just worked wonderfully. Watery Grave felt like such a fun ability to give to this Pokemon. I will definitely be using it more in the future. Hoofleeny, the Flexible Body Pokemon. Based on the giant Pacific octopus and escape artist, this Pokemon was a lot of fun to design. Even if the first pass was kinda meh. The head was originally a lot bumpier and the Pokemon was facing right side up, but the rest of the design was more or less the same. Initially, the head did have a color separation, but I removed it just to make the design feel more streamlined. The arms are supposed to resemble a straitjacket, with this Pokemon being held upside down with its own ESP. I made it in an escape artist since, if you don't know, Octopi can basically squeeze through anything so long as their brain and beak can fit through it. I cannot take credit for this amazing name. It is a combo of Houdini and Duflini, part of the scientific name for the giant Pacific octopus. I do want to bring back Escape Artist in the future, it just has to be with very specific Pokemon. Kore, the guitarfish Pokemon. This long boy is based on the guitarfish and chorus, a West African instrument. I've been meaning to do a guitar Pokemon for a while, but I still wanted to include something culturally relevant to the region, so the Kora was a perfect compromise. This barely needed to change from the initial pass, only making the fins near the base of the tail more 3D and to adjust the perspective of the face. Otherwise, this was so simple, I didn't need to change anything else. I brought back Battlecry since I thought it was fitting and I just wanted to reuse the ability in general. Bathaslice, the deep sea Pokemon. This bottom-dwelling demon is based on the deep sea lizardfish. I was going to make this based off of a bear trap due to this species' penchant for camping on the seafloor, but I had forgotten all about Galarian Stunfisk. With that in mind, I've just made this Pokemon into an armor-plated asshole of a monotype. After some minor adjustments across the board, this steely prick was perfect. Sharpness was a no-brainer ability-wise, and I hadn't used Storm Drain in a hot minute, so I said screw it. The shiny's solid, but there's not much more to say about this Pokemon. Moving on. Drunkoff, the sloshed Pokemon. Our next Convergent line, these Pokemon are based on vervet monkeys and their habit of getting absolutely plastered on fermented fruit, as well as the Slacking line. I've been wanting to do something with the Slacking line, and this was a perfect opportunity. In terms of the design, I only had to make a few changes, mainly turning the drool from its mouth into the tongue. Lastly, I added some details onto the inside of the ears. Other than that, it was a fairly simple design that was easy to knock out. I do really love the shiny, though. It's very clean. Vervaroth, the drunkard Pokemon. Much like Drunkoff, this design barely needed to change, only fixing some minor perspective issues once I flipped the design, and adding more details to the fermented berry in its hand. I will admit the berry juice does look a touch too much like blood, potentially, but not enough to make me go back and edit it. This probably has the best pose of the evolutionary line. These two entries might be a touch lackluster, but I can assure you the final evolution made me work for it. Hoozing, the headache Pokemon. The first pass of this Pokemon was pretty boring. Just having it stand in an attempt to make it more distinct from Slacking, but it just did not work. The tie around its head, that was the suggestion that was too funny not to keep in the final design. In the second pass, I gave it its current pose, and the rest was basically history. No, the real issues came with the final pass getting these small details across the board and making it still readable at a glance. Oh my god. Fun fact, Hangover's effects changed a few times here and there before I finally settled on this effect during development. Part of me is still tempted to change it back to what it originally was, but that one gave it a 1 in 3 chance not to attack during its turn. Aside from that, I did have a lot of fun with this Convergent. And as such, this absolute unit is the 4th member of my in-game team. Nasekian Vullaby, the Ice Scavenger Pokemon. Our next regional variant, this line is based on bearded vultures. This didn't change at all from the base sketch. I cooked with this one. I love the colors for this Pokemon, especially the deep red eyes of the source material. It pops so nicely against the icy color scheme. I liked the idea of the fluff covering the lower face like a scarf and making the tuft of hair on top longer for a better silhouette. I made the claws a bit bigger and I curved the wings more than normal Vullabies. Not much more to say with this one. This shiny is just okay. Nasik and Mandibuzz, the Ice Vulture Pokemon. The first pass of this Pokemon didn't change enough at all. The perspective of the feet were off, the shape of the mustache was boring, the tail feathers were too small, the hair on top of the head was too rigid and just dull. I was told to make the next pass more evil looking to fit the vibe of the lore for this Pokemon, and that's just what I did. I added the Ice Skull shoulder pads to the design on top to help fix some of the issues from the first pass. I did briefly remove the spikes from the waist, but I added them back on after some feedback. It's just not Mandibuzz without them. I love ghost types. I've never made that a secret that they're my favorite type, but I always have so much freedom when I design them. Panthrone, the Hidden King Pokemon. We're about to have back-to-back Marvel-based Pokemon, so strap in. These are fun. First off, we have the King of Wakanda, T'Challa himself, aka the Black Panther. I went back and forth on the typing of this Pokemon. Steel fighting, sound steel, etc. The sound type was suggested because of the kinetic waves produced by T'Challa's vibranium suit. I wanted this Pokemon to be sleek and simplistic overall. Well, simplistic for me, anyway. I went with the purplish black for the base color since after someone sent me a sketch with a potential color scheme. I knew I wanted to do the glowing pattern across the body to reference the kinetic energy stored within the suit activating in the movies. Naturally, I had to make the shiny a reference to Killmonger, sans the overused hairstyle. This is the 5th member of my endgame team. I know, damn near back-to-back. But what is a king without his queen by his side? Typhoro, the weather goddess Pokemon. This icon is based on the Omega-level weather goddess herself, Aurora Monroe, aka Storm, and the legendary bird, the Rock. I had a lot of help with this design. I based a lot of this off of suggestions sent to me. With that said, the first pass was still meh as fuck. The feet in particular lacked a lot of impact, but the worst part was the pose. It was just so damn boring. And the next pass, which I did while my house had lost power, was more or less this design. Compared to the first pass, this is an insane glow-up. Outside of adding the claws at the end of the talons, the design was more or less perfect. Climate as an ability went through so many changes. I think I discussed the ability more than I did the actual Pokemon attached to it. I was getting so frustrated during that conversation, boy howdy. But we eventually clapped it out into what you see here. She is such a great design and a great version exclusive counterpart to Panthrone. Jive-Vermin, the saxophone Pokemon. Our next new evolution, this is the evolved form of Jonrat once exposed to a water stone and is based off of the blues and jazz music. First pass wasn't too bad, but boy was it rough around the edges. The tail was more overtly a saxophone and the face just looked awkward with how I tried to do the perspective. So, after some feedback, I made the tail into, and I quote, a cartoon depiction of meat. And they were right, it worked a lot better. I also made this boy a lot thicker to look like more famous blues musicians and for more general body variation with all of the Jonrat evolutions. For the record, this Pokemon is blind, which is one of the many reasons for the sunglasses on the face. The colors just needed some saturation/hue adjustments to get where they needed to be. In terms of all of the Jonrat evolutions I've done, this is probably in the middle tier so far. Infirmed, the sickly soul Pokemon. These sickly puppers are based on Ethiopian wolves and their real bad habit of catching diseases easier than most species. The first pass wasn't terrible, but it lacked a lot of what makes the final evolution good. It looked way too much like a lot of my other Pokemon, so I needed to shuffle some things around. In the second pass, I changed up the proportions and added the poisonous snot dripping from the nose and the mud ice pack on top of the head. The droopier ears were a suggestion, granted one I had toned back in some future passes, but they were a good suggestion nonetheless. Fun fact, I actually had a fully rendered design for an earlier pass that just kept getting worse and worse the more I worked on it. I had to completely redesign this Pokemon more or less to get what you see here. Without a doubt, this was the most difficult one to nail down. I was getting depressed with how badly I was fumbling this design. But once I got the design down, the colors weren't too much of a struggle. Barely, but I got there. Repupperath, the Rejuvenation Pokemon. The last design I worked on for this line, this Pokemon was more or less perfect after I did the other two stages and knew what I wanted to do for this one. After the clusterfuck of the first stage, this and the final evolution were a breath of fresh air. This still has the poison coursing through its body, now forming toxic drool instead of a snot bubble. I did have to tweak the saturation of the colors a bit so the reds of the fur and the eyes didn't blend together. I really do love this line. The final evolution, though, really brings it all together nicely. Though this stage has my favorite shiny out of the entire line. Simensis, the Resilient Spirit Pokemon. I did skip the middle stage briefly to work on this design since I had a better idea of what I wanted to do with it at the time. This is the exact opposite of my experience with the first stage. This was basically perfect from the start. Thank Arceus. The design and colors didn't give me any major trouble. This line has been telling a story if I haven't been obvious enough. The first stage is sickly and near death. The middle stage is on the mend, but not quite there yet. Here, this Pokemon is cured and is healthy. As much as a ghost can be anyway. I created Metal after suggestion, playing off this Pokemon dealing with sicknesses, aka status conditions. Plus, we need a special attack version of Guts anyway. Madger, the Brave Badger Pokemon. Our next baby Pokemon, we're giving some love to the Sendine region, as this is the pre-evolved form of Melavenom before it hits level 25. I added this Pokemon since not doing with anything with Melavenom in the Xenia region was a crime that I needed to atone for here in its sister region. The first pass wasn't bad, but it wasn't good at all. The basic design was there, but the silhouette needed a lot of work. I also had to simplify it a lot, mainly just streamlining it to what you see now. Instead of the Beedrill stingers you see on Melavenom, it has Weedle horns and stinger now lodged into its back. Otherwise, this is just a fairly simple design. The shinies for this entire line may be basic, but I think they're executed very well. Furratel, the Honey Badger Pokemon. This unit evolves from Melavenom once it defeats 15 Beedrill while holding honey. I wanted this absolute monster to look insane. The Mega Beedrill stingers being the focal point of the design alongside the honey coating the body. The first pass was mainly just getting the general idea down, whereas the second one was focused on getting the body plan and proportions down. I had to adjust the arms and legs a bit to get them just right. The colors took a fair bit of work to iron out, mainly just the accents. At first they were yellow like the other stages, but it clashed too much with the honey color, so that had to change. I initially tried Golbat Blue, but I settled on the lighter purple after some feedback. I did have to go back and redo the face to include the open mouth, just to make this Pokemon a tad more dynamic. It was the right decision. One of these days I might give Melavenom itself a Mega Evolution. We'll see. Nasikian Girafarig, the long-neck Pokemon. I knew with this regional variant I wanted to play around with the idea of the tail on normal Girafarig taking over the body, so I made this into a Dark Psychic type. This is probably the second easiest regional variant to design out of this entire group, only outdone by the last one we have on the docket later on. I had a lot of fun playing with the colors, but that's about it in terms of difficulty. While this one was a breeze, the evolution was not. Parallelorap, the dual-sided Pokemon. This unit evolves from Nasikian Girafarig once it learns its signature move, Double Trouble, and is based off the Beta Girafarig design. Boy, was this Pokemon trouble! The name was a suggestion, one I am so thankful for. The first pass got the overall look at the design down, but the proportions and posing were terrible. The second pass was a lot better, especially with the blockier body and spreading the legs out more for a better sense of balance for the pose. The perspective on the heads and necks did take more time than I anticipated, but it was worth it. The colors took a long time as well. I had to redo the accents a lot, especially not using any of my regular go-to shades. All in all, though, this was a really fun regional evolution, despite the massive headache it gave me at times. Caloroach, the Shrieking Roach Pokemon. This line is based off of Madagascar hissing cockroaches. I didn't have a secondary theme for the line for a good minute, but eventually the coward angle was thrown out, and the rest was history. The first pass was good, but it read more as grumpy or angry rather than outright terrified. The curved shell was a suggestion to make it look more like anxious eyebrows, and it worked out really, really well. I love the pupils I gave this Pokemon. It's something I keep consistent throughout the entire evolutionary line. This has a solid shiny. I really do love the pink for the eyes. Pestbroic, the coward Pokemon. This design was a bit trickier than its Prevo. I'll be blunt, the first pass was fucking awful. I tried to have it on all fours, well, sixes in that case, and it just looked terrible. After some research and looking at the community, I brought it back on two legs. The overall look was solidified in this pass, but the proportions, pose, and personality were not there yet. A sketch sent my way introduced the whistle-like mandibles, the more cowardly expression, and the exclamation point antennae. I made the arms a lot fatter once I had fixed the mistakes that were there once flipping the canvas, which there were plenty of. There, it wasn't too much of a hassle. Keep this Pokemon in mind for the future. It might be getting love sooner than you expect. Heliosol, the Sunbrella Pokemon. Our next new evolution is the evolved form of Heliolisk when it's traded while knowing Sunny Day. This is based on frilled lizards and the Casa Obake. I had the idea to turn the frill into an umbrella with the patterning to reference the Casa Obake. The first pass nailed the overall look and pose, but the proportions and details needed some work. The frill needed to be a lot wider with some more detailing, mainly the tips at the end. I went back and forth on the head being the eye for the Casa Obake or having a spot act as that, eventually settling on this version of it. My tried and true dark blue returned after an attempt to make the main body orange, the design needing more contrast color-wise. After I added the tips to the frills and the eye, the rest was good to go. The render on those sections in particular were a lot of fun. I brought back solar radiation from the Curia reboot to play into the sun umbrella thing this Pokemon has going on. Another Pokemon I wish I could have added to my in-game team. Cublaze, the Eternal Fox Pokemon. Back-to-back new evolutions. This is the evolved form of Ninetales once it's traded while holding a spell tag, still based off of Kitsune's. The first pass got the overall vibe down, but was missing a lot of the details that'd be on the final design. Yes, Cubimon from Digimon Tamers was a big influence on this design. I actually had to remove a good amount of the patterns I had on the body after some experimenting. They just cluttered things way too much to keep them. But the colors took the longest time for the actual body of the Pokemon. We'll get to the tails in a minute here, with the pink accents being originally way more vibrant in that regard. The render on the fur needed some work, the highlights being way too bright, and it's kind of distracting looking at it now. The spell tag tails were a gigantic pain in the ass. I needed a lot of help getting the flow of the curve and adjusting the patterns to make them feel more natural. After adjusting those and fixing the head on this Pokemon, I had it down. Oh my god, the tails took so long to fix in the final pass. Still, this is another peak evolution in my catalog. Bakucha, the nail Pokemon. So this line is based on hammerhead bats, but originally this stage was supposed to be based off of horseshoe bats, and oh my god, it was mid. I said screw subtlety and have the nose be an actual horseshoe and tried to play into a luck theme. You can see how well that went. After wanting to rip out my remaining hair, I eventually scrapped that idea and went with the current design. And the first pass sucked. The eyes were too small, the hairline was whack, and the muzzle at the time just didn't look good among other issues plaguing it. The second pass thankfully more or less got us to the current design, aside from a few elements like the eyebrows and the fangs. This design / motif was definitely a lot better than the first pass, that's for damn sure. I brought back construction from the Texican region since it felt thematic, and I just wanted to bring it back. Oh, the Kucha part of the name is the Swahili word for nail, FYI. Hammerathis, the Hammerbat Pokemon. The first pass for this boyo wasn't too bad, all things considered, but the shapes were a lot more boring. A sketch sent to me really helped finalize this design, mainly with the shorter wings. Honestly, I need to do that more. From there, reposing this Pokemon was a piece of cake. But yeah, I went insanely literal for this line, this one being a hammer and the Prevo being a nail. Thankfully, this was so much easier than its Prevo. I did not need another headache. If this was ever in a real game, this would be a lock-in for a Team Sky playthrough. Wawantosaurus, the Damn Dino Pokemon. We got back-to-back cryptid Pokemon here as version exclusives as well, this one being based on Mokole Mimbe. I wanted this Pokemon to act like a dam, jamming up rivers so it can eat the moss floating on top. First pass was actually pretty good, but the feet, head size, and the jaw needed some work. I had to shrink the head so this Pokemon felt bigger, and then make the actual jaw bigger so it just didn't feel disconnected as it did at the time. The legs had to be redone to feel more accurate to a Brontosaurus, so that was the main thing I focused on in the second pass. I also did have to redo the tail, since that pass's perspective and flow did not add up on a second look. The legs needed more definition, so that's why I also segmented them, and the torso while I was at it. Lastly, I raised the back leg to see how this Pokemon would look in motion, and just for a general better silhouette. I definitely prefer its version exclusive counterpart, but this is still a pretty fun Pokemon. Ilkanyamba, the horse eel Pokemon. Speaking of which, this long lad is based on the Inkanyamba, cryptid described as an eel or snake with a horse's head, more or less. The first pass was basic as hell, only really setting the baseline for the design but excelling at literally nothing else. The next pass, I made the fins and mane look more like lightning bolts, I shrank the head, and added part of the mane covering the back of the neck. I opened up the mouth since the design was feeling lacking at that point, which was definitely the right call. Finally, I reposed the Pokemon one more time to get the current design since the old pose was just way too boring. Though, I did have to do a few passes to get the curve of the body just right. Fun fact, the original name was Inkanyambolt, but that was just way too wordy. From there, this was just good to go. I really do love this design. Bowerbite, the Protector Pokemon. This goodish boy is based on Boer Bulldogs and Guard Dogs. The first pass was good, until someone pointed out it looked way too much like Mastiff, and then I couldn't unsee it. Fixing it was fairly easy, and the end result is what you see on screen now. Since the design process was fairly painless, I'll just talk about my favorite design detail. I love the chain leash pattern going down the stomach from the neck. I thought that was a fun way to allude to guard dogs on a leash, and to help just break up the empty space on the body. But let's move on to the evolution where I actually have something to talk about. Pursue Ridge, the Protector Pokemon. This evolves from Bowerbite once exposed to a combat stone and is based on Rhodesian Ridgebacks and Victorian-era big game hunters. The first pass was pretty close, but unfortunately it looked like it was just wearing clothes, so I had to tone that down. From there, I changed the eye shape and I made the mustache more pronounced. I made it look like an old-school hunter since Ridgebacks are very good for keeping prey in place during hunts, so I thought I'd play off that factoid for this Pokemon. Overall, this is a very fun line, but it's nothing special. Jackrool, the Disease Hound Pokemon. This little shit is based on black-backed jackals and their nature of being prevalent disease carriers, mainly with rabies, and their place in African folklore as tricksters, hence the dark poison typing. I'll be honest, the lore behind this Pokemon is more in-depth than the design process, since this was a piece of cake since the beginning. The only thing I added were the toxic vapors coming out of the mouth, and then this design was more or less done. I did debate on the accent colors for the claws and teeth, but the yellowish off-white did the trick. Keep this Pokemon in mind for the future. It just might be getting some love sooner rather than later. Scorchmore, the Incense Pokemon, our final new evolution for the base region. This evolves from Heatmore once exposed to a Firestone. This is based off of Anteaters and Incense Bowls. I know Incense Bowls usually repel insects, but I thought it'd be a fun twist to have them lure them in. The biggest changes of the design came down to the shape of the smoke and the overall color scheme. I added the Durant metal accents after a suggestion, and boy did it help. I did briefly make the head look more earth-colored, like Heatmore's, but it just did not work out entirely, so I settled on only having that be part of the head's color scheme. The smoke didn't feel psychic-y enough, so I added the curls like you'd see on Masharna. The idea was sent to me, and oh my god, it was a fantastic one. From there, the rest was history. Maybe one day I'll add a baby Pokemon for Heatmore and Durance to complete the lines, but for now, I'm putting a pin in that idea. Nasik Region, the Hidden Venom Pokemon, our final regional variant, until any DLC anyway. This is based off of the Reef Stonefish and throws in dive balls this time for the eyes. This was the easiest regional variant by a landslide. I didn't have to change a damn thing for this design whatsoever. The most difficult part was erasing the line work on the inside of the eyes so they felt more natural. Other than that, this is up there with the simplest Pokemon in the entire region. I know this is kind of a dud to end the regional variants off of, but them's the breaks, as they say. Desertite, the Empty Hump Pokemon, our final baby Pokemon added to the region. This is the pre-evolved form of Camavan, which is now the evolution to male Desertite. We'll talk about the female evolution here in a minute. I did this Pokemon after I did the female evolution, so I could take both elements to make a better Prevo for both. For this Pokemon, I wanted to give it the female evolution's hair shape but keep the saddle closer to Camavan's. Color-wise, I took the brown from Camavan and the blue, albeit a different shade from the female evolution. As far as the design itself goes, I didn't have to change a damn thing, really. I've alluded to the other evolution enough. Let's meet her, shall we? Ongurongi, the Dazzling Saddle Pokemon. The evolution of female Desertite. This is based on camels and, I believe I'm pronouncing this correctly, Bedouin Saddles. My first pass was pretty much on the money, the saddle being the only thing that really needed some work. Once I flipped the design, I did really have to fix the top of the saddle to make it look good. I knew I wanted this Pokemon to be very colorful to reference the saddle I modeled it after, and to add more contrast to Camavan. This and Desert Type really didn't give me too many issues, thankfully. Noikit, the giant ears Pokemon, our final convergent Pokemon of the region. These boyos are based off of bat ear foxes. I was so close to getting this perfect on the first go around, but Noibat's muzzle did not look good on this Pokemon, so I had to change that aspect of the face. Outside of that, the only minor issue I had was the eye color, almost going with an orange, but settling on the green since it had more contrast. 3 guesses why I gave this line Insectivore for the hidden ability. I adore that shiny so much. Noiville, the bat-eared Pokemon. Like with Noikit, this furry fellow was so close to being perfect on the first try. This time around, it was the ears that needed work. They didn't change the head shape enough from Noivern, so I raised the ears up and made them a touch longer. From there, this was a breeze. The name, however, I cannot take credit for. It was a suggestion like many of the other great Pokemon in my catalog. These two are simple but effective designs all around. No major complaints. Warthogshus, the stinky pig Pokemon. This Warthog Pokemon needs more Hakuna Matata in its life, but at least the design is solid. The first pass was kinda boring, but the foundation worked. The pose was the worst part by far, it was just way too dull. The second pass is where the design came together. I made the foul-smelling mud more of a focal point with this design, I made the tusks longer, and I gave them a little bit more of a curve. I made the snout longer with the cheekbones being a lot more pronounced. I did add the poison droplet pattern later on to help break up the empty space, and looking at my catalog, and apparently I just like this pattern. This Pokemon is nothing special on its own, but it does get some love in a future region and a unique friendship, so stay tuned for that. Tenricity, the Spark Spike Pokemon. This tiny little spark plug is based off of Lowland Street Tenrix, and boy did this line give me trouble. The first pass was a lot rougher around the edges. The hair looked awkward, the eyes looked wrong on this Pokemon, and the back legs anatomy just looked terrible. The next pass was better, replacing the eyes and fixing the back legs. However, some of the patterns needed to be readjusted to help simplify the design. Lastly, I added these spines across the body as the last adjustment before I rendered. The stage was a lot easier than its evolution, which gave me hell! Pyropine, the Sunspike Pokemon. This unit evolves from Tenricity once exposed to a Firestone and is based off of African crested porcupines. Fun fact, out of all the animals I make into Pokemon, porcupines routinely give me the hardest fucking time. Trying to simplify the quills always gives me hell. The first pass was bad, just bad, no beating around the bush. The next pass was moderately less terrible, giving the body the overall proportions and patterns it have in the final stage. The colors and patterns took a while to get down, especially with the sun spines on the back and the little pompadour. I had to really simplify the hair, removing a lot of details and just making it a solid blue. Speaking of which, the shade of dark blue took a while to get right. I also did have to shrink the front legs by just a smidge. I don't hate this design, but I am really not happy with it either. Phosguni, the Leaf Shield Pokemon. Our second to last regular Pokemon here is based on the Fossa and Noogie stick fighting. Fun fact, this was originally a dark fighting type based on Morigne, a Madagascar-based martial arts, before I eventually changed it into grass fighting. The first passes were just terrible. I tried having it stand on 2 feet and on all 4s before I had to rework this completely and change the fighting style. The redesign came together fairly quickly once I switched gears to the stick fighting aspect. I am so much happier with this design, even if the sap holding the leaf to the end of the tail could have been a bit drippier to make for a more interesting silhouette. Counterfright, the fake coin Pokemon. This Pokemon gave me hell despite how simplistic the design is on paper. Before I forget, this is based on counterfeit and Gimmighoul coins. So, fun fact, I actually did a fully rendered pass with this Pokemon that was just facing the camera head on, but oh my god, it was so boring. It was suggested to make this more of a 3/4 view to help it be more dynamic looking. It took a while to get the depth correct, especially after making the tops of the eyes bigger to help take up more space on the actual coin. Oh, I also made the pupils bigger to emote easier. This gave me a lot of headaches during development, but I'm glad I was able to do this design since I had it on the back burner for a long time. Bakulaunch, the missile squid Pokemon, our first fossil Pokemon of the region. This is revived from the torpedo fossil and is based on Bakulites. Much like the other fossil of the region, this wasn't my first idea. The original idea was a rock steel type that was basically a group made up of 3 Pokemon. Unfortunately, that design was a 3-pack of ass, and I quickly switched gears to the Bakulite. The first pose was boring as hell, but I got a lot of the foundation down. The second pass got the pose down, but the proportions and the patterns were severely lacking. I had to round off the tip of the shell and turn the biggest tentacles into a propeller after some feedback. I added the bubble trail to make it just a little bit more dynamic and interesting to look at. It did have a glowing warhead at one point, but it just didn't work out and it just cluttered the design. The colors took a minute to lock down, and I had to rework the patterns more than once. It was worth it, however. I brought back Explosive Start from the Curia reboot since, let's be honest, it was way too fitting for this Pokemon. Brump Tundra, the Frozen Palm Pokemon, our second fossil of the region. This is revived from the Palm fossil and is based on, and bear with me here, Theropictus Brumpty and Gelada monkeys. Fun fact, this originally wasn't one of the fossils of the region. The original one was based on Antarcticalama. This thing. Whatever. But after a lot of trial and error, mostly errors, it just didn't work. Eventually, I had to shift gears and go with Monkey for the fossil line. I decided to make it an ancestor to a lot of my baboon Pokemon just for some juicy lore. I knocked it out of the park with the first pass, being more or less perfect. I only needed to fix the line work and move the tail up the body. I love the shinies for this line. White shinies can go so hard with the right accent colors. Frigilata, the Frozen Palm Pokemon. The first pass of this design was more or less there, but it needed more details to feel like an ice type. Before I get into that, I made this Pokemon look more like a Gelada monkey by adding the heart symbol on the chest, albeit upside down, and the pink on the snout to reference them pulling their lips back during intimidation displays. I had to add a lot more woolly looking fur to the body, while also increasing the length of the fur cape around the torso. I changed the main fur color to more of a Tyrantrum red for better contrast. From there, this was simple. I brought back Mind Games to reference it once being a psychic type before the reanimation process, and further tying into its descendants. It has vegetarian as one of its abilities since, despite their looks, Gelada monkeys are vegetarians. Clobbering Web, the Paradox Pokemon. That's right, Paradox Pokemon are back after a brief hiatus. We're starting off with this Paradox Spidos based on Ogre Spiders, Oni, and Kanabos. The first pass of this paradox had to be bipedal like Spidops, and it just didn't look good. So in the second pass, I gave it its current body plan. The third and final pass is where this design really came together for the better. Added the tiny little legs up front to better tie into Shinobite, the evolution of Spidops I created a while back, and as a means to help break up the silhouette a little bit more. This is probably my favorite past paradox of the batch, but it has some strong-ass competition in that regard. Writhing Organ, the Paradox Pokemon. This long boy is a past Paradox Pyukumuku based on the Biscoin, a concept I originally had for the Nacton region before the Terra Leak happened. I cannot take credit for the name before we begin. I originally wanted to call it Draconic Maw before this gem of a name was dropped on my lap. Design-wise, this was pretty much there from the start, only needed some minor proportion adjustments on the organs/tongue here. Color-wise, I added the purple gradient to the front half just to make it look a touch more interesting. This is Head and Shoulders, the simplest paradox in the entire region. But it really didn't need to be very complicated to be good, thankfully. Tumorous Titan, the Paradox Pokemon. This Paradox Reuniclus is pretty easy, all things considered, to design. Added the horns to the nucleus body, bulked up the cell lining avatar, added a crap ton of the floating bits across the design to act like a pseudo-skeleton. Honestly, the name and render took longer than the actual design. I did have to do a layer over the insides of the designs to get that nice layered look I wanted, like they're actually inside the body. Originally, the horns on the little nucleus body were a separate color, but it was suggested to make them the same color as the rest of the body. That really helped a lot. I went through a bunch of names before someone suggested this one. Crushing Nucleus and Malignant Mutant were the other names in contention at one point, but Tumorous Titan was too hard not to use. I normally don't like to reuse names in the same region, so you'll be seeing another Titan very soon. It just happened, they were too good to change. Phantom Burn, the Paradox Pokemon. This sucker is based on Ghost Peppers and Stizzle from the Curia reboot. Originally, this Pokemon was called Sizzling Soul until the goated name suggestion was thrown my way. The design itself wasn't too hard, but the color balance was a goddamn nightmare. I had to simplify the patterns, move them around, remove some of them entirely just to get the color balance to where it is currently. The torso was originally 3 colored segments instead of 2, the stinger was originally solid red, and the order of red, yellow, orange had to be reversed. I had to remove a lot of details on the stinger itself to give it a smoother look. I did try more traditional gradients for the limbs, but eventually I had to do what you see here. They just did not look good otherwise. This is one of my better paradoxes modeled after one of my own fakemon. Stampeding Titan, the Paradox Pokemon. This Paradox Rampardos is mainly modeled around battering rams. The first pass had almost all the basics nailed down, minus one big omission: the arms. I thought not having arms would have made it more unique, but it unbalanced the design. Speaking of unbalanced, I had to redo the pose to the upright position you see here. Not only to make it look a little bit more unique compared to Rampardos, but leaning it all the way forward just made the design look too unbalanced despite my best efforts. Oh, I made this a rock dragon type just for the vibes if you're curious. This was the second easiest past paradox to make of this region, only outclassed by Writhing Organ. Iron Cub, the Paradox Pokemon. The first future paradox of the region, this Paradox Cubchoo is based on the Coca-Cola bear ads. What does this have to do with South Africa? Absolutely nothing. But the idea was too funny not to use. The first pass was okay, but the proportions were terrible. The snot drip was too big, the eyes and the head were too small, the arms were in the wrong position, and the tail looked like ass. The colors were also a nightmare, going through so many alternative palettes with dark blue or pink. It was the third proper pass that this Pokemon came together nicely. I was so out of practice with future Paradox Pokemon, so it took a while to shake the rust off. Pun intended. Iron Tycho, the Paradox Pokemon. This was a fun one. This Paradox Raichu is modeled after Gorochu and Tycho drums, if the name wasn't obvious enough. Compared to the first passive Iron Cub, this started off in a much better position. Only the color balance and the perspective of the drums really needed any alteration. The drums themselves were the most complicated thing to do with this design, and took a long time to get them to look right. Originally, I was going to go with Iron Drums as the name, which, looking back, is basic as all fuck, but once Iron Tycho was suggested, it was locked in. This is one of my favorite future Paradox Pokemon, if only because it's just a little bit different than the norm. Iron Eclipse, the Paradox Pokemon. We got a 2-for-1 special here with this combo paradox of Solrock and Lunatone being based off of a solar eclipse. The body of the first pass was good. The sun rays / floating panels, not so much. They looked terrible. The next pass when it came to those were head and shoulders better than the original. From there, the design was almost complete, only needing to make 2 more adjustments. The first was making the Solrock side of the body's eye light blue for more contrast. The second being adding more spots on the Lunatone side to help remove some of the negative space. I really do enjoy making combos of counterparts for Paradox Pokemon. I need to do that more often. Iron Tengu, the Paradox Pokemon. Next up, we have a Paradox Shiftry that brings back its Tengu roots and takes to the skies. Go Team Sky. The first pass of this design, however, was fucking terrible. I tried to make it look more jet-like in the posing, and nothing worked about it whatsoever. After that atrocity, the next pass was more or less the final design, even if I forgot to add the bottom of the Geta sandals at the time and had to go back. Color-wise, I did have to add the gunmetal gray across the body since originally it was more primarily brown, and it didn't feel enough like a future Paradox Pokemon. I had to work on the pose more than once since apparently this thing had too much sake and was way too unbalanced. Damn near about to fall on its face. I did get some minor backlash on the name, but I stuck to my guns since I didn't want to call this Iron Fan or anything like that. This was a pain in the ass. Easily the most difficult design out of this entire batch of Paradox Pokemon. Iron Depth, the Paradox Pokemon. Our second to last future Paradox Pokemon, this is based on Orclacier from the Sindine region and Deep Sea subs. Fun fact, this was originally almost a Paradox Wailord, but that had been done too much, and I wanted to do more Paradoxes in my own Pokemon. This was the complete opposite experience that I had with Iron Tengu. The first pass was great, but I just needed to make it look a tad more robotic. I made the teeth have the glow in between the jaws, added the hatch to the bottom of the stomach, and I made the windows on the side glow as well. Originally just being spots on the side of a design. This is very simple, but it was a lot of fun to work on. Vampirid, the luring light Pokemon. This flying nuisance is the pseudo-legendary of the region and is based on the legend of Adzi. Adzi is a South African mythological figure who can turn into a firefly or a mosquito to drain people of their blood. Continuing with my pledge not to use fairy or dragon type pseudos for a long time, we get another bug type pseudo. Yay! In terms of design, this really didn't change a whole lot from the first sketch. I only needed to adjust the proportions of the body and add the tongue both as a means to look a little cuter and a way for it to drain Pokemon of their blood. I combined the Firefly and Mosquito transformations into one Pokemon since I thought that'd make for the most interesting design. And I was right. This line has some of my favorite shinies that I've ever done. Bringing back Bloodsucker as the main ability was too perfect. Poison Touch, only because of the mosquito element. I cannot take credit for this kick-ass name as much as I want to. Most Schemer, the luring light Pokemon. Now bringing in more of the mosquito elements to the design, this was almost perfect from jump. The wings are the weak link on this design, needing to change both in shape and in coloration. Originally, they were more like traditional bug Pokemon wings until a suggestion to make them yellow was thrown my way. After squaring off the ends of the wings, this was a cakewalk. This was almost Skeet Terror before the Giga Chad who suggested the previous name came back to deliver more heat. Adziveri, the luring light Pokemon, the final evolution of the line. This is a lot more humanoid to reference Adzie's regular/human form. Outside of some minor details, this was more or less perfect. I can actually take credit for the name this time before I forget to mention it. I did have to move the legs further apart since in the original sketch it looks like the knees looked like they were fusing into one with how I had positioned them. Lighting was a pain in the ass on the abdomen. I had to redo that more than once. Color-wise, I had to really simplify this more than once. This originally had multiple shades of red, and it just cluttered the design too much. I wish I could take credit for the name for Toxic Induction, but I cannot. Originally, it was just going to be a reskinned Poison Puppeteer, but that changed during brainstorming. This is one of my favorite pseudos, and cliche as it may be, this is the final member of my in-game team. Malevolent Volt, the Paradox Pokemon. The final past Paradox Pokemon, this is a Paradox version of Thundora based on Kaiser Ghidorah from Godzilla Final Wars. The first pass was pretty lame, I can't lie. I didn't change nearly enough from Thundora, and as a result, the design looks like ass. The proportions were dull. The changes amounted to just making it a quadruped and making the wings teeny tiny. After some feedback, this design started to come together. I shrank the heads and necks on the side, I simplified the wings, changed the horns on each head, made the necks longer, and finally I adjusted the shape of the legs. I did have to remove a scale pattern I'd had on the body to help it from getting too cluttered. Lastly, I made the jaws their own color to help break up the color palette, and the design was complete after that. Of the two final paradoxes, this is definitely the better of the two, but its counterpart is still pretty damn good in my opinion. Iron Hydra, the Paradox Pokemon. The final future paradox. This is based on Mecha King Ghidorah from Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. The initial design got pretty damn close to the final product, only needing to reposition the feet for more balance, making the heads look more 3D, and lastly adjust the wing at the back to be more in scale with the one up front. I also had to redesign the breastplate to help it feel more natural and to help with the color balancing. Speaking of colors, I did have to simplify the palette here and there. The rendering was tough, I won't lie, but damn it, this design came out really nicely. I still prefer Malevolent Volt, but this is a damn good kaiju Pokemon. Bovimpi, the War Bull Pokemon. The mythical of the region. I've been trying to do better about introducing these. This is based on Shaka Zulu and the Bull Formation. Oh, the first pass was so close to being perfect, but it had so many tiny issues holding it back. It was a touch too Toro shaped in the front, so I mainly had to change some things around. The following passes, I had to make sure that the end of the tail and the chest armor looked more 3D. Color-wise, the armor itself went through more than a few colors, going from tan to the current blue. The render thankfully wasn't too difficult, so I didn't have to spend a whole lot of time stressing about it. Definitely one of the best mythicals in my catalog. You'll be seeing a lot more mythicals in the future to make up with all the regions I missed out on prior. Amazona, the Water Goddess Pokemon. Alright. Whew, home stretch, let's do this. We have the first member of the Balance Trio, who is based on Inko Sazana, a fertility goddess who has been known to take on the form of a mermaid. The basic design only took 2 passes to iron out, but the rainbow shawl was a colossal pain in the ass. I tried turning the shawl into an actual rainbow, and had the brilliant idea to turn the shawl into her hair at one point. abject failures on both accounts. After that, I changed the shape of the shawl to drape over her arms and then reduced the colors to just the warmer ones. After multiple fumbles, I finally nailed down the current design. Otherwise, I just had to tone down the saturation of the blue and green of the body, as well as adding the pink to the jewels on the gold. This trio is very diverse in their designs, which I actually think helps make for a stronger legendary trio. Sharongo, the Thunder Ram Pokemon. This one is based on Shango, the Orisha god of storms, fire, and thunder, and his animal symbol, the ram. I made it an electric fighting type to help balance out the trio's type synergy, and it's just a fun type combo all around. The first pass was pretty close to perfect, but it lacked a lot of the finer details. I did try to turn the horns into an axe at one point, but it just looked awful, so I just made the crown look like his Orisha axe. I added the gold and electrified tips to the horns to help balance out the design. Lastly, I added the gold around the torso and the red jewels onto the legs. Once that was done, this boy was good to go. This is easily my favorite of the trio by a landslide. I debated giving this a Stormcloud motif, but I was so sick of doing that, I just couldn't. Ecuadora, the Phantom Body Pokemon. Our final legendary and Pokemon of the region. The leader of the balanced trio here is based on Adroa/Adro, who is the supreme god of the Longbara people. This was the most difficult deity/deities I could have picked, since Adro is often depicted as having half of a body visible and just hopping around on one leg when they show up. Adroa at least gives me the snake connection thanks to their kin being able to turn into giant river snakes. A lot of the foundation of this design was sent my way during a brainstorming session. The whole shedded skin motif was their idea, and I wish I had thought of that. The first pass wasn't terrible, but the proportions were boring and the patterns were out of control. Initially, the actual body was pink and green, but the palette got way too busy very quickly. The second pass got it more or less there, still needing to simplify some of the remaining patterns or just remove them entirely. I went back and forth on how the Dex entry was going to explain the invisibility, but I think I got it nailed down. This might be one of the biggest pains in the asses I've ever done, but it's also one of the best legendary Pokemon that I've ever done. So I guess it equals out. And with that, we close the book on the Nasik region for now until we get some DLC down the line, which probably won't be for a while. I had a lot of fun and struggles with this region in particular. From bringing back Paradox Pokemon after taking a break from them for so long, to numerous Pokemon just giving me more trouble than I expected. I had my work cut out for me, but it was more than worth it. This is one of the strongest regions I've ever done. I made sure that this and the Zinnia reboot had even more overlap, so if you're watching this video after that one comes out in the future, go and check it out. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video. Click on the bell icon to stay up to date for all future uploads. Down below per usual, let me know what your in-game team would be. I got a lot of cool videos planned for this year. Speaking of which, we're headed back to the Nacton region to a small series of islands off the coastline. Apparently, there have been some sightings of some new Ultra Beasts, and the League wants you to keep an eye on them and figure out what's going on. We're headed to the Sicil Archipelago. This is Austin, signing out.